We know that a lot of the institutions have come for Bitcoin now. We've got ETFs, we've got all these institutional products. Companies are putting it on their balance sheet.
From our perspective, I think we both agree, fear and greed is a great one to look at. I think most recently seeing what some of the bigger fish in the sea are doing. So looking at ETFs, we've seen declining net flows probably for the last week.
Something is bubbling for me underneath the surface. This is something that we want to be keeping our eye very, very closely on. I think people are still on the fence, sitting on the sidelines. I think it wouldn't take too much to really spur it.
Hey guys, welcome to this week's episode of The Poddy, and with me again, Tommy. Mate, welcome again.
I told you, man of my word, 2 weeks in a row.
It's going to be good having you back this week specifically because we talked a lot about what we were seeing last week, which we'll touch on very briefly. But I think we both sort of agreed this week it'd be good to continue on the theme of everything looking quite optimistic, quite bullish. I think we could make this episode specifically around the altcoins because I know we sort of steered away from it on the show for quite a bit because it hasn't been, I think, number one, it's never easy to call. Number two, no one ever wants to put their name against it.
Yeah.
Unless you're some influencer on TikTok, then you love to just talk endlessly about it. But I feel like
you can just say it, Pav.
It's
been shit for altcoins.
It's been shit for altcoins. It's been very short, myopic runs. They go for maybe 2 weeks. And it's interesting because you said last week if you're bullish for 2 weeks in a row, be concerned. So I'd be interested to see your thoughts, obviously, this week. But I think what we want to sort of give everyone maybe a bit of a takeaway is how we're approaching the coming weeks, the coming months. Where do we see a potential favoritism, I would say, for altcoins over Bitcoin? Everyone's been kind of waiting, when. It's a bit of a toxic thing, but at the same time, I think it's an important thing to address because everyone's going to keep talking about it and there's just this general misunderstanding about it. So I think we maybe hopefully bring a bit of our experience, debunk a few myths and just think about things pragmatically of what we've seen in the past that generally leads to altcoins outperforming for a sustained period of time. So
we touched on last week, I guess, the unit economics. Bitcoin is too expensive. Ethereum probably too expensive for a lot of people now. What's the next coins or what's the next assets to get a hold of that actually feel tangible or achievable for users to get one full unit or multiple units of the asset? And I think that's perfectly rolls into talking about altcoins and the mythical alt season that everyone's been holding out for probably a few years now, realistically. It has been.
But just to sort of cap off where we came from last week, we saw the markets sort of start off a bit sideways. Tuesday, we saw that inflation data that we were talking about on the show last week come in quite optimistic for the market, which we saw everything just send green until Thursday when there was another inflation metric land in the US, which was over expectation. So basically, again, we saw a point where the market thought something was going to happen and the opposite happened. And then we've just seen the market see red since then. In fact, there's quite a few in the top 100 that a lot of people might be holding that are seeing double-digit losses, right? So obviously not a great time for many. One thing we've always looked at in the past is Google search trends. Yeah. And I mean, this is something that it's just gone from nothing to new all-time highs.
This one took me by a bit of surprise actually when I was doing some research over the weekend and found that the Google search interest for altcoins, anything around altcoins actually was trending pretty high as well, but altcoins specifically as a Google search term is at a 5-year high.
It's right crazy. Now, I would have never thought that.
It really crept up on me, that one. But I guess it's who cares or why does that matter? I think there's a few ways to cut this one. I think for me, the interest is never really left on altcoins. Yep. You've got a massive disparity with different types of investors. You've got people that bought at the tops in 2021, 22 that have sit on their bags of altcoins for a long time, waiting for them to come back. You've got people that have mid-market, bear market, seen the opportunity or liked the narrative or jumped on maybe a new L1 or an L2 play in the altcoin space, just to use an example. Yeah. That have been sitting on those for some time, waiting for the alt season of the price action. And then you got people, I guess, that are just buying in now for the first time and just waiting for something, like I said, that unit economics piece, that something outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum that's achievable for them to try and, create wealth or create profits essentially. So
it's an interesting space now compared to last cycle. I feel like last time around it was still very new frontierish. Now we've seen legislation come in, people are like, well, there's actual real world applications for payments, for, supply chain improvements, for but almost anything in between, to be honest, like even disintermediating a lot of other industries because of the idea of the AI can be built into smart contracts now. So you've got this race of, I think it's a lot of the younger generation, but trying to speculate where the puck is going on, as you like to say. So I can see why there's investor appetite in altcoins, but yeah, like you said, it's been very secular. Like the whole market hasn't run as a whole. And I know a lot of analysts out there on Twitter or whatever, they're talking that we're not going to see an alt season like we have in the past.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to lie. I've probably prescribed to parts of that myself.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just through listening to too many people, or at least absorbing a lot of that information. But I mean, the stats don't lie. Google search trends is something that we do keep a relatively close eye on, I thought, until this one crept up on me.
Yeah.
But it's saying that we're 2x higher than 2021's like froth.
That's crazy.
I just remember how bullish things were in 2021. Yeah. Like it was a no-lose game at the time. Like everything was so bullish. There was positive news stories. There was new companies popping up. Obviously, we know what happened since then.
Yeah.
But even then as well, larger than like Trump's pump in 2024. So it's signaling something. Something is bubbling for me underneath the surface, and this is something that we want to be keeping our eye very, very closely on. I guess my personal view on it is people are still holding out some hope. I think people are still, especially in the altcoin space, we're kind of focusing on altcoins today, but I think people are still on the fence, sitting on the sidelines. I think it wouldn't take too much to really spur it.
That's it.
A few months back, we did see a bit of an early sign that, Bitcoin ran, then it cooled off. We see potentially some of the Bitcoin gains or the Bitcoin money flowing into some of the altcoins. It was short-lived. It didn't sustain.
Yeah.
But I think people are potentially seeing that early piece as a signal as to what could happen if we really get bullish here. There still is a pretty hungry pool of capital that's ready to jump on this thing if it goes.
No, I agree. I think one thing I take away from just the Google search trend data alone is, to me, it's just the amount of eyes looking at the catalog. It's just, we've never had this many set of eyes looking at crypto ever. And that's how Google search trend data works. It's normalized data. So, relative to the past, there's twice as many people out there just waiting.
Why do you think that is? Or do you think there's a particular reason for that now?
I'd like to be holistic about it and say that as much as it might be, a bit of a game. Some people think about Trump coming into the space and he's doing it for his own to get ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, even if he is going to get ahead, there's going to be a bunch of people that want to get ahead with him, I feel.
Like the rising tide lifts all boats type of narrative.
Pretty much. And now that we've actually seen a lot of people come out and say, well, this fixes this fixes that, the industry, well, the person coming into the space can actually have a little bit more of a calculated bet on maybe where they want to put their funds. I know we've seen like the Circle IPO just in the equities market, just absolutely blow expectations out of the water.
Yep.
So
many more of those to come as well. You see many some of the other big crypto names talking about IPOs.
Bitwise, BitGet, I think even just a lot of the insurance companies. Like you said, there's a lot coming.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of it also to kick off needs a catalyst. And if I had to point to one personally, I think it's ETH making new all-time highs. I feel like once we get that, maybe a lot of people just go, all right, I'm going to get into something, maybe commit to speculating. We also have to look at the lens of like, what's the state of the global environment at the moment? Like, it still seems like everyone's waiting on the Fed to reduce rates, which is kind of a bit of a scary thing that a lot of people are holding out on hope on that quite a bit too. So,
the market's been moving for a while now. I was talking to somebody last week, somebody who's not in the space.
Oh, yeah?
And they said, I heard crypto's doing pretty well at the moment. And I was like, it's actually been doing really well for the last 2.5 years.
It has.
Realistically, right? We've been in a pretty much up and to the right market for 2.5 years now, but nobody gets interested. And I think retail lags heavily behind market movements because retail waits until it's in the
comfort zone.
It's in the comfort zone, or it's in it's in 9 News, or it's in it's in Sky News that Bitcoin is making an all-time high, or some of the mainstream media channels where we're kind of we're under the hood, back in the trenches, watching it as it starts to build, which is really realistically that's when you want to be involved, more so than top of the market or when the mainstream media is talking about it. But the reality, I actually took stock myself and went back into charts, and I was like, we've been bullish now for 2.5 years. So we've really been in a bull cycle for that long. You were picking up Bitcoin for 2.5 years ago, like
15K,
15 grand, right?
18 grand.
And we're now talking about Bitcoin at 120 something thousand US. So people forget that, I think, and obviously the people that have joined the market really recently, it's like no good to me talking about 2.5 years ago, which is completely fair. But many of us, it's been a really good period for us. So I think it's good to take stock every now and then of where we've come from as well.
Well, this might be a good contrast then. So we look at the same Google Trend search data. We just search Bitcoin instead of altcoins. It's actually it's at the middle ground. So if we look at like how it normalizes data, it basically goes from 0 to 100. It's currently sitting at about, let's call it 45, right?
Yep.
And the last time it was at 100, so peak eyes on the market was at 2021 end of the year market over Q4 period.
Right.
So how do you read that when you think about altcoins being at all-time highs, but Bitcoin still kind of under its 50% threshold for views?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, considering Bitcoin's kind of week on week hitting all-time highs, right? I guess
it's in the media.
Yeah.
I
think it's, maybe it just speaks to the type of investor that's targeting these different types of assets.
Yeah.
We know that a lot of the institutions have come for Bitcoin now. We've got ETFs, we've got all these institutional products. Companies are putting it on their balance sheet. Companies are not putting altcoins really on their balance. Maybe they are.
They're starting
to now, which is
the creepy thing. Yeah.
Maybe that's a good thing. But I guess, my point is the metric that we're reviewing here is probably like retail eyeballs, like the top of funnel people coming in to go and search Bitcoin or people go and search altcoins. So for that investor class, I think they're looking for the what's next story, which we've kind of talked about.
Well, that's a good segue again to the next search term, XRP. It's basically done a 4x in terms of people looking for XRP on Google, again, as a search term, with the recent court case getting cleared, etc. So again,
that chart is amazing.
So
just looking at it here, it's just like slight little spike and then like a flat line, like a dead person in the hospital, and then they've got the heart started up again.
They've given it some adrenaline. But I think that speaks exactly to the story you're saying, that you're getting the mindset of the investor coming in now. They're not looking for stable, they're looking for growth and acceleration, right?
Yeah,
so they're looking to speculate.
Yeah, exactly right. It makes sense to the average person. That doesn't mean the average retail person isn't coming in accumulating Bitcoin or buying some Bitcoin, but I think in terms of, I think it's a really good point you make that they're looking for portfolio growth, right? Again, you could argue Bitcoin is a really good one to have in there, but people are looking to, I guess, potentially diversify into the altcoins, looking for something which is, something I really don't like hearing people say every time, but it's I'm looking for something that's going to do 10x, not 30% a year or 20% a year. I'm like, well, okay, the 10x could be 0x, or you could lose your whole principal investment versus something that's going to steadily build you potentially, not financial advice. But it's just something that we hear every single cycle from different types of investors. So I think it's really important to take stock in that too.
It is important to note that probably is unfortunately just human psychology, right? Like everyone's like, oh, this is the coin that's going to make it for me because I've got in because I heard about it on Twitter before someone else heard about it, or TikTok. Like it is a thing of like, crypto is one of these weird spaces where you can make 50% in a month and you're like, it's not enough.
I know. It blows my mind.
It does. But then everyone's been there at least a few times.
Yeah.
I know we definitely have been. It kind of takes you a few times of touching the fire before you go.
Absolutely. We're definitely not people sitting here on a high horse saying, I can't believe you would do that. Like we've done it.
I've fumbled
multiple times.
Yeah.
Even after knowing that we shouldn't do it, we've done it multiple times again. It's like the definition of insanity, right?
Yeah,
keep doing the things over and over again and then expecting a different outcome. But it's lessons definitely learned along the way. And I think there's always a place for some risk in your portfolio.
Absolutely.
It depends on, as you get more experience, you understand what you're comfortable with and what you're not comfortable with. And I think that's what I've learned anyway. And that's how I've slightly, massively adjusted my investment thesis in not just crypto, but multiple asset classes over the years.
Yeah, I think with altcoins, my biggest takeaway is I thought, well, I've got into this one early. I've got to hold it for, I'm going to be safe and hold it for when we get to the end. And I'm just going to sell it. I'm not going to get greedy.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when you realize over time that, it's a market, we're here to see portfolio growth, the amount of times you're offered those 20+% moves sometimes, just even taking the chance to take some off and go into another one at another time, there's always more and more opportunity. I feel like in the last 12 months, as much as we haven't seen an alt season, there's probably been a lot more opportunity than when you think about, remember DeFi summer back in like 2021?
Yep.
Everything kind of went vertical for like 2 months and then it just went sideways and down for like 6 months. nothing really bumped up at all. Whereas like now, at least you could say, at least we see a bit of a ripple wave. Yeah.
And I think the whole, I'm going to butcher this guy's name, but Lazarus something pizza guy, Bitcoin pizza guy.
Yeah.
That spent the
Bitcoin on
on the pizza.
Yeah.
Or even just stories of people selling all of their Bitcoin at $1 and, things like that. Looking back on what could have been, that's a very rare case. But people, even when they invest in altcoins or any investment, they think, oh, if I sell it all now, it's going to go immediately to 100x, right? So I think it's just that mindset of, I think when profits are on the table, it's a really good practice to have a look at it, see if it's worth taking at the time. I think, and we talked about it last week, a lot of my personal investing kind of strategy is to take risk off the table as into a strong market and sell into strength.
Yep.
But I'm not selling 100% of the assets I have conviction on, right? So you're keeping some for just in case that was to happen.
Yeah. You're basically saying that, hey, look, if we do get a pullback, which we regularly see in a bull market, I've got something available to redeploy.
Correct. Yes. You're kind of rebalancing that position in itself.
Yeah, rebalancing is a good way to put it.
If it goes 100x, awesome. I've still got some, so I'm still capturing some of that upside. I haven't completely sold out of my position. So, yeah, I think it is an interesting one. People always think they're going to miss the 10x move or the 100x move. Generally, it's not the case. The other point there is, and I have to check myself on this pretty regularly, is even if your favorite asset is up 50%, 100% today, there's a very high chance tomorrow or next week it's going to be in the red pretty heavily, right? That's how markets move. They move in these swings and roundabouts, right? So we often forget that there's going to be another down day. When everything is so bullish, we forget that there's going to be a down day.
To think about it.
It is. We don't want to think about it, right? No. Like it's, we're geared towards positivity, as we should be. But,
well, that's a good segue, I guess, for what we see coming in the near term and maybe the longer term. Like, I think if we, again, just look at the data, like we've never had the access to more sentiment checks ever. And that could be a bad thing, overanalyzing, right, what we're seeing in the market. But I think from our perspective, like I think we both agree, like fear and greed is a great one to look at. I think most recently seeing what some of the bigger fish in the sea are doing. So looking at ETFs, we've seen declining net flows probably for the last week, just with this recent, I guess you could call it the market being unsure of what's happening, with Russia, Ukraine, with what's happening with US policy right now. And even just a general aspect of when we look at the data, Q3 generally isn't that great for Bitcoin, which means it's never great for crypto in general. And then Q4 is usually the bumper one. So if we've got this idea that, hey, look, we're potentially coming into a slowdown, into potentially a boom, historically speaking, what does that look like for an investor right now? I find these parts of the market are quite tricky because what you actually see is like something like Bitcoin, which might be maybe going sideways, looking weak in general, but it could take 2 or 3 weeks to break down, which is honestly where I sort of sit at the moment. You can still see altcoins maybe go ballistic for 1 to 3 weeks while Bitcoin's kind of just hold it in a holding pattern. And we look at something like Polymarket data, which is something recently I've been looking at. So Polymarket's just like a global sort of betting app where everyone can sort of bet on the chances of certain things. The idea that the market was thinking Ethereum was going to put an all-time high in August has gone from 60+% to now 40%. So, there's a lot of sentiment and you could call it hope riding on the idea that Ethereum is going to break into new all-time highs in August. And the one thing I think we've learned over the years is whatever everyone wants, they don't generally get. So I think it's still an interesting one in terms of where we could be going. But I think that's a nice way to sort of track how heated things are getting. But I think what that also calls back to is what we were talking about earlier, like the whole market searching for altcoins. What are they looking as like check marks to be more confident? And that, again, I think just feeds into the idea that there's a heavy emphasis on ETH over, 4,800, heavy emphasis on Sol over 220, which isn't an all-time high, but it is just that next milestone for it. Yeah,
and we've seen, since recording the podcast last week, we have seen... I think I called out on the podcast some of the Ethereum staking queues.
Oh, they're still big.
Starting to back up.
Yeah.
Still pretty high. It got released into the mainstream media or relatively mainstream crypto media, I suppose, post that conversation, which was maybe they were listening to the podcast, Pav.
But that's it.
But it did get released in, and I think the assumption there was that we've got a lot of people waiting to take some profits on ETH.
I mean, they can't sell it till it's out.
Yeah, that's right. So I think maybe we're starting to see some of that sell pressure hit the market now as well. And Ethereum was down 5 or 6% over the last couple of days versus the general market, which has been like in the 2s and 3s. So we have seen maybe some of that selling pressure starting to hit the market. But again, I think
it's going up 15 days now.
What's that?
It's up to 15 days now to exit.
15 days on exit. So yeah, so if you started a withdrawal today, you won't get your ETH to sell it down for 15 days. So that's
almost 1 million ETH waiting to exit.
Yeah, it's a fair bit of cash.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, well, that kind of plays into this idea of what if Bitcoin is in a holding pattern for August?
Yeah,
ETH can't get out to sell, so maybe we do see that reduction in supply, and we could see all-time highs in August. Maybe.
Yeah, it's a theory.
It's a theory.
Yeah. Oftentimes we don't know what the why is behind some of the market movements. I think with this one, it's good. Like, you can actually map it to go, all right, cool, we've got all this Ethereum that's locked up. We're moving into new price discovery on Ethereum.
Yep.
Yeah, maybe some of these people want to take some, risk off the table or take some profit or whatever their narrative is. It just paints a good little picture as to why it's happening. It doesn't make me go, oh shit, I need to sell out of my ETH now. But it's a good signal in the market for you to go, do I want to adjust my trading decisions right now based on the fact that there's, what you say, 1 million ETH looking to maybe come out and sell down.
I think we both have the idea that we still see higher, but it's just these, everyone wants to know what happens next. I feel like it's fun to play this game of where it could go next.
I think I was really bullish last week, like pinch myself bullish. This week I'm a little bit more cautiously optimistic. Obviously, it's easier to say that now that we've seen a big push after the podcast last week into a really solid cool off now.
Yep.
I think the next the overall market structure hasn't changed for me. We could see a bit of a cool off over the next couple of months, but I do still think we see a strong finish towards the end of the year, which is relatively aligned, I think, to what you were talking about, like that Q4
definitely
strong cycle.
Yeah, to get to the market, to get it moving in this direction for this long, it's going to take a lot to turn it back around, I feel. So anything we see, but that's the problem with altcoins, like a short-term pullback is still 20%, right? So it can seem like the end of the world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I still think like if we do get a cool off, it probably does come in the next couple of weeks, but it's going to be hard. I still feel like there's a chance that next 2 weeks we see alts go crazy, but yeah, I'm still definitely more focused on Q4, 100%.
Yeah, and I think it's just important to remember that just because we're suggesting that we might see it strong into the year doesn't mean it's going to be just up and to the right now, right? So there's going to be a lot of tricky conditions to navigate between now and call it Christmas. Some people might just want to go, I don't care about it. I'll just sit on my hands, or I'll sit on my positions up until Christmas and then look at it, or start to look at it again in November, December. Totally fine. For people that are more regularly trading, I want to try and catch some of that opportunity as it does, play into volatility. That's probably more so who we're speaking to. People that are sitting on their positions, totally fine. Always keep an eye on it, of course. You want to be keeping an eye on where the markets are going, what that narrative is. But to your point, we've put in such a strong concrete base now, 2.5 years of a structure or a cycle, that it does take more than a couple of weeks of negative press or publicity to actually completely shift it around and go, all right, we're starting here in a multi-year bear market, right? Which is what everyone is kind of afraid of.
Yeah, what's more likely? People get more greedy and we go higher, or the whole world just falls apart? I kind of hope the latter ain't true. So
yeah. And some of those signals we talked about in the podcast around Google search trends, these are all just little data points to go,
put it all together for the story.
All right, there's still interest here. Yeah. There is still interest here. We're not, and there's some other, I'm sure we'll talk about it in future podcasts.
Yes.
There's other little trends that we start to see that could start to signal interest going out of the market, which then you start to talk about
going to be juicy.
The turn, and that's where the real juice comes in, I guess.
That's it. I think that's good. I think it's a wrap.
See you guys next week.
Thank you. Catch you later.